Good afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reed. Here's my co-host, Dave Bernstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello. One
What's the
thing I want to
latest?
put at one thing I want to put at the top of the show because it's worth knowing.
Mhm.
My sister-in-law just recovered from a pulmonary embolism. They're pretty common. I had one about 8 years ago.
Mhm.
20% of the people who get an embolism die from it. So it's pretty serious. The way to know when you're short of breath, whether it's just you're short of breath for something else or an embolism, it's a little device you put on your finger called a pulse oximeter.
Mhm.
If the reading on that, which is the oxygen in your blood, is 97, 98, you're fine. If it's below 90, you get to the nearest hospital immediately and they start feeding you oxygen. She's fine. I recovered fine, but it would be good to have one in every medicine cabinet.
Yeah. Yeah, we have one. My daughter a few months ago had pneumonia for the fourth time. And we had a visiting practitioner that came to the house and followed up after she got discharged from the hospital. And that was one of the things that she recommended that we get, and we did. So we have that little device, and every now and then we check each other out and make sure everybody's number is 96, 97, or better. And give the name again, Dave, just so that our listeners
Called
and
the pulse oximeter.
pulse sex.
I'm sure you can buy them in any drugstore, Walmart. I happen to look on Amazon where they're only $10 now. Prices come all the way down.
Pulse exometer.
Pulse, as in your
Yes.
pulse,
Yes.
oximeter, as an
Oximeter, okay.
oxygen meter.
It's measuring the oxygen levels in your blood.
Yeah. And it
Okay.
will tell you whether or not you are having an embolism and better get to the hospital
Mhm.
immediately.
Mhm.
If you don't, you're dead, literally,
Mhm.
often.
Good to know. Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's our medical tip for today. Now, what else is going on? There's a big story in AI that hit just a last day or two about the Chinese, Dave, and something called DeepSeek. What's going on there?
Actually, it's not a particularly big story. At least what the New York Times and everybody else is reporting is not a particularly big story. It's just that most of the reporters didn't know what was going on.
Well, the,
Here's
the,
what
the market took a big dive. A number of the tech companies lost billions of dollars on that information, with
we're
however
not
accurate.
talking billions of dollars. We're talking 693 billion in one day
Mhm.
in the case of Nvidia. They got
Wow.
about they got about 200 million of that back today. But
Hmm.
that's got to be something close to a record.
Hmm. Now, Dave,
And it's
you're the
totally
expert on this
ridiculous
stuff.
because there was no news.
But
There was no big news.
you're the expert on this stuff, and I certainly am going to defer to you in terms of its import. But one of the things that I read was that the DeepSeek model only requires 1/10 of the computing power of some of the other comparable models. I mean,
Probably.
that's a huge difference in capacity requirements, is it not?
It probably is, but that's not what all the stories are about, and that's not what the stock market fall is about. The reason that Jensen Long and Company lost $600 billion yesterday is that people suddenly realized that, as I've put it often, including on this show, being born in Chicago or San Jose does not make you any smarter than somebody born in Chengdu or Shenzhen or Beijing. The result is that if the resources are there, the Chinese can catch up with anything we're doing. And they did. They were pretty close 2 years ago and 6 months ago. And I brought it to the show. They were so close, you could say that the Chinese and the Americans were equal. So that the news that everybody thought was big news, and I'm talking about the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, that the Chinese all of a sudden have caught up with us. It's not particularly interesting because it was already so close that it wasn't much of a change.
Mhm. But now, Dave, isn't there a big difference in the models? I mean, again, I'm a layman and I haven't studied the stuff like you have. But from what I read, there's a big difference in how the models work. The DeepSeek is more software driven and it's open source, and it developed without a lot of the support from the U.S. industry in terms of the NVIDIA chips, etc. And they had to go another route in terms of how they put their model together. Is that accurate?
Okay, so you're accurate that it is big news for us in AI. There were two things that were important in the DeepSeek. One of them is with several different techniques, they seem to be, and we don't have hard data on this, something like 3/4 less computing power. And since the computing power we're talking about is literally billion-dollar data centers running for a month and a half,
Mhm.
costing $100 million, which is what the big models are in the United States. They claim they did it for 6 million, uh, but when you looked at it closely, it might have been 15 million. But that's an awful lot less than 100 million.
Mhm.
So that's big news, but that isn't what they were all writing about. What they were all writing about was, how could the Chinese be as smart as the Americans? Aren't we exceptional? And
Uh, that underlying racism. That's how I look at it.
well, I don't know any other way to explain it. Well,
Mhm.
actually, not, because American exceptionalism, which is actually the term for this,
Mhm.
is also applied to American attitudes toward France and Germany and England,
Mhm.
where most of the early Americans came from.
Right.
That we think we are so much better than anyone else. We're not. There's lots of great things about this country. There's lots of great things about our technology, but there's nothing that says that we should permanently be ahead of other countries with the same resources. And
So,
now
so,
China,
so, so what impact is this going to have, Dave? You think it's just going to blow over? I mean, or is it going to really be some sort of sea change in the way the other AI companies have to operate?
we don't know,
Mhm.
partly because we don't know quite what they did. They actually gave us lots of technical details, but until other people start working with it, you won't know just how important it is.
Mhm.
It looks like they have important details improved, and it looks like they are using a lot fewer chips. It literally is $100 million worth of chips to build a model like OpenAI,
Mhm.
or time on chips in a data center. And if you can do it for 3/4 done, that's important.
Mhm.
However, NVIDIA, which lost, as I say, something like 693 million in one day yesterday, has a backlog that's 18 months long. You might have noticed, and we can get to this in a little bit, that the White House announced a $500 billion investment in chips and data centers. About half of that would go to the chips and about half of it to building the things. It's not going to be that much. We'll get to that. But there's going to be enough demand that NVIDIA is going to be selling plenty of chips for the next few years. So, does it have an effect? Has a heck of a lot of effect to the people in artificial intelligence, if in fact these Chinese people, who are all young, not famous, and there weren't that many of them. When you look at something like OpenAI or Facebook's model, those have literally, they put the names on some of the papers, 400 people working to create them. They're that complicated. It looks like the Chinese did it with 25 people.
Whoa.
And
That's amazing.
that tells you a lot. It says something that we who programmed always believed, that a really good programmer is so much better than an ordinary programmer that you can get much better results. And in fact, another proof on that was a couple of months ago. Elon Musk's Grok came up with a model that wasn't quite as good as OpenAI, but it's close enough for most practical purposes. And they did it with a team of about 20 people working very hard and working very well together.
Mhm.
So that tells you a lot about the programmers and programming, but doesn't explain why $1 trillion disappeared from the market prices of NVIDIA and
Mhm.
Microsoft.
Well,
And
Dave, tell me about
yeah.
the fact that this company DeepSeek developed their stuff with open source as opposed to proprietary software. Yeah, how did that impact their cost structure, do you think?
Didn't we just do a story about that? A whole show about that?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And we had the people about free software, which is a step beyond open source,
Right.
talking about how that has enormous advantages. In the last 5 days, I've seen at least 4 projects, 2 of which have preliminary results, that have taken the DeepSeek model and put it to work on things like 4 Macintoshes.
Mhm.
And they lose a little bit of accuracy to do that. But because you can take it, because they're making the weights available, and they're making some of the stuff, it's not fully open source. They're making the model available, but they didn't make open source all their programming tools, but they wrote about them so you could do it. That is a better way to do it.
Mhm.
And in fact, Jan LeCun, who is the chief scientist for Meta, building some of the best models, and one of the best people working in AI, his co-author, Jeff Hinman, just got the Nobel Prize for some work. And Jan did some of that work. And he's right here in New York at NYU, incidentally. And Jan said, no, this isn't a story about China versus the US. This is a story about how open source is that much better. And I think I said that here on the air about 3 years ago. Because when I started seeing what was what, I went down to an event at Beta Works run by an old friend named John Borthwick. And I just seen just how good this chat GPT was. We now know some of the problems. It hallucinates a lot. But it was really amazing how good it had gotten in just a few years. And I asked John why. And he said, because it's all open source and we're all learning from each other.
Mhm.
That's the way we think universities were. And to a certain extent in medicine, yeah, they try to get a patent and make $1 billion on the drug patent. But by and large, the university's researchers share their information.
Mhm.
Now, the Chinese researchers, and DeepSeek is one of only 5, of at least 5, who are close to the best in the Americans, uh, share all their work, and that is going to pull China ahead. We're a little bit lucky in that Jan at Meta convinced Mark Zuckerberg to put his model out as open source. And until 3 months ago, it was by far the best open source model, and it was almost as good as the proprietary models. Now we have, since then, we've got two, three, four Chinese models that are better than the Meta model and comparable to the best at Claude or OpenAI or Google. That is great for the world. It's an awfully defeating thing for, well, people who like said today that we are going to keep our big lead in AI technology. I'm doing it by memory, but that's what they said. That came out of the White House.
Wow.
And it is pure nonsense. For the last year and a half, we've had a small lead at best. And they should know that. Among other things, Jeff Hinman just won the Nobel Prize for this stuff. Said about a month ago, we may be a little bit ahead of the Chinese. Jeff Hinman knew better than all the people in Washington, including all those making really stupid policies because they think we're so much better. And as I say, that just came out of the White House today, that we're far ahead.
Well, let me ask you this, Dave, in terms of putting that in perspective. Is there room in the market for multiple models, or do you think, one model is going to ultimately dominate all of AI, or can there be half a dozen models out there sharing the marketplace? What is your take
How
on
many
that?
major models do you think are out there right now?
Yeah, we know about five or so of the big guys, but there are probably dozens more small ones.
There's 20 substantial models that are somewhat similar in capacity
Mhm.
to ChatGPT.
Okay.
That there are five or six out of China. There's two from France. There may be one out of Saudi Arabia.
Mhm.
And there are all the companies you've been hearing about in the United States who they think are going to make tens or hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, wonderful things are happening with AI. We're starting to see the medical advances. Jenny can create a voice that sounds like the original actor when she needed to dub in something. The videos were really good 4 months ago, and they're much better now. I've been saying they're not quite ready for prime time. That may have changed in the last month. Incidentally, on that as well, there are two Chinese who are as good as any of the Americans.
So are there going to be niches of applications where one company may dominate, and then you go to another type of application or another niche, and another company dominates? Is that how the landscape seems to be shaping out?
My technique, I was in the middle of the biggest one a long time ago, the biggest boom and bubble in the last 50 years, the internet bubble.
Mhm.
And I happened to be right in the middle of it because broadband and DSL was what I was specializing in, and that was one of the biggest parts. And suddenly there were 8 chip makers making DSL chips.
Mhm.
For the next 10 years, I've watched as one after another finally gave up, and we wound up with two vendors. I think what's going to happen in AI, in the main models, is that 8 out of 10 of them are going to fail.
Mhm.
And there will be probably a half dozen who have different advantages. One of the advantages may be it's designed to do Japanese or Arabic, uh, and so on. So there's going to be room for half a dozen and maybe a dozen, but we're already over 25 huge $100 million models out there because it's
Mhm.
infinite money because people thought This was, did I quote King Charles to you on the air?
I think you did, but it's worth re-quoting for our listeners because I don't remember it, so they probably don't either. What did he say?
The King of England said, "This is the biggest advance since the invention of fire." That's probably exaggerated.
You're talking about AI.
The AI that we have
Hmm.
now, the neural networks,
Hmm.
and I can tell you again and again how many powerful things are being done, particularly in chemistry and biology and medicine.
Hmm.
They don't get so much publicity, but that's going to be a big payoff. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, well, what?
What?
Not today, but one day, Dave, I'd like to do a show that focuses on what you're just saying now, some of the applications, as opposed to the industry and the industry players and the jockeying back and forth. What are we seeing in terms of actual use cases for the AI, and how is that impacting and improving our everyday lives? I know we've talked about it in bits and pieces.
Not
Uh,
very much so
yeah,
far.
yeah.
In fact, the people in the industry are saying, oh, yeah, finally in 2025, we'll start having things that are useful for individuals
Hmm.
like you and me. And probably at this point, there's hundreds of agents on the market, and there may be half a dozen that are worth very much,
Hmm.
and dozens that will probably be worth very much in 2 years that they can do. Now it can book your airline tickets, comparing all the prices for you and things like that. That's fine, but that's not changing the world.
Hmm.
In science, the other Nobel Prize, if this was in medicine, went to Dennis Hassabis and John Jumper for something called Alpha Zero. There are 200,000 or so known proteins. A protein is a very complicated chemical with hundreds or thousands of different subunits.
Hmm.
They're all specified by DNA and RNA, but it's really important how they fold. How do they work? An enzyme has to have a pouch, a spot that is perfect for what the chemical it's going to change. So when we think about everything like creating energy out of sugar, glucose to ATP in your body, that's all done by proteins. Finding the structure of a protein took several years of a PhD's time. And the result was why we got hemoglobin. That also won a Nobel Prize a number of years ago. That was the first. The vast bulk of those 200,000, nobody knew what their structure was, which means by and large, nobody knew how they were going to work. We now have a 90% accurate piece of software coming out of Google's DeepMind in London that has found the structures of most of the known proteins. And what that lets them do, and it's just starting to get in advanced testing. A couple of things are in human trials, but very early, is that if you had to find something that, for example, killed a particular bacteria, you can look at that bacteria and say, what is the property of that bacteria? And create a protein that hooks onto that bacteria and destroys it. That's in fact how most antibiotics work. But antibiotics were not built by men or women. Uh, Antibiotics were mostly discovered because evolution over 2 billion years has created all kinds of incredible things that are in plants and animals to protect against bacteria and viruses and so on. They, for the last since they did the structure of DNA 20 years ago, They then had to look at, okay, how do we use the fact that we know all these components? We know what is in DNA and in what order it is. And we know the general structure of DNA, that's the double helix stuff. But we didn't know how that affected making things like the sugar in your blood into energy for your muscles. That one they may have found, I don't know, but the vast bulk of the proteins had never been deciphered at that level.
Okay.
That's
That's the kind of stuff that, we're going to do a show on that, Dave. So the actual impact in the real world that we can see. But right now we got to take a break.
okay.
We're about halfway into the show. And
Okay. Sorry I talk so much, but
no, this stuff
I'm
is
really
fascinating.
angry at the lousy reporting in the Washington Post. I've sent a note down to a friend down
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay. You're listening to Dave Burstein and Stu Reed on Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Stay tuned. We're going to take a brief break and be right back.
I realize I'm enough for me now. I turn the corner, no apologies and no hesitation to my destination. Reset my life, hey, it's my time. I forgive you for my heartache. No more sad songs, I can see the daybreak. Morning meditation, thoughtful relaxation. Trust the healing, learn to love again, love again. Babe, I know you've done it before. It's always easy, leave and close the door. I'm taking back my power within. Reset my life, hey, it's my time. It's too late, gotta love myself, babe. Say it's too late, trust the voice inside. I already know the strength that I own. Reset my life, hey, it's my time.
we're back. Community and Technology. Dave Bursey and Stu Reed here on WHCR 90.3 FM. Before the break, we were talking a lot about the AI and some of the latest developments with DeepSeek, but I wanted to change up a little bit, David. I know there have been some developments in the energy sector. I saw, noticed a story that you had pulled out about solar power outpacing coal power in Europe for the first time. A new report describing a historic low for coal in Europe. What's going on with that?
It is definitely possible to deal with global warming if the politicians get it together to do it. Again and again, we're seeing stories that tell the technologist how to do it. And in fact, well, this is the Europe one. In Europe, renewables are now 47% of the energy, of the electricity being produced. Coal is down. That was 34% 5 years ago. And if it keeps going up at 10% every 4 years, global warming is solved. But as we know, the United States is far behind Europe in this. Mm-hmm. And the Biden people, the science people, knew what climate change was. Anybody who's seen the stories out of Los Angeles know how severe it already is. 10,000 homes were destroyed. It's going to be, and there's going to be more of that, because it turns out that there's more extreme weather because of the global warming that people hadn't even thought about. Mm-hmm. Most people thought about global warming was a long-term problem. But we're seeing that
here it is, right here, right in our face. Yeah.
And
it looks like this new administration is going to roll back a lot of the energy efficiency regulations that have kind of been trending in this country. Anyway, do you think that's going to have a big impact globally, or is the rest of the world going to keep moving in the direction they're going towards?
Well, Chinese are ahead of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The Indians are starting to get serious. We just talked about how the Europeans are serious. So good things are happening, except in the United States and in countries that can't afford to do it, which is almost all of Africa and most of Latin America. They can't afford to do very much. Mm-hmm. The U.S. was going to make a big difference. But since we're only about 15% of all the greenhouse gases or anything pollution, 15 or 20%. The fact that we're going a little bit slower probably doesn't affect the modeling for the world. Mm-hmm. If it gets reversed when we get somebody who's not such a bleeding idiot in the White House, who cannot accept something that's clearly true. That was one, we had this whole thing. The Chinese now have Chinese 6 months ago pulled even with the United States in AI, by and large. Mm-hmm. It's going to be neck and neck for the next few years. Mm-hmm. When Facebook, Meta, comes out with its next model, it will probably be ahead of the Chinese that just came out. Mm-hmm. The Chinese were a little bit ahead of OpenAI, and everybody's going to leapfrog.
Mm-hmm. No, David, it's interesting. I just want you to highlight. You're talking about all these other countries and how they're moving rapidly in technology. And we're also looking at this administration, some of the policies, in particular, the immigration policies they're trying to turn back. They are turning back. But you highlighted some stuff that we looked at offline that talks about the huge number of huge proportion of immigrants that are involved in technology fields in the U.S. Some 77% of U.S. AI companies were either founded or co-founded by immigrants. or children of immigrants. That's a huge number. And
Oh,
what?
what our hatred of immigrants is going to decimate the AI field.
Mm.
Just what we're doing now, frankly, poor folks who are coming from Nicaragua that don't have much education, that's not going to affect what's happening in AI. It may affect the farmers and it may affect a lot of other things. But if we are, as the Biden administration started, blocking just about everybody from China, that will more than decimate the US AI industry over the next few years.
Mhm.
Decimate, if you think of the Latin root, is killing or destroying 1 in 10. And it's going to be more than that because something between 25 and 30% of all the AI researchers in the United States came from China.
Mhm.
5 years ago, if you wanted to be at the best AI stuff, the people who are really doing it, you almost had to come to the United States. Yes, there was some work being done everywhere and some excellent work being done in England and France and Germany and China and Japan, but the vast bulk of it was in the United States. So 3/4 of the best AI students came to the US for graduate school, and many of them stayed here.
Mhm.
And heck, I was just talking about Inman, who won the Nobel Prize. He was British, and he came to Carnegie Mellon because he was ahead of everybody. Because Carnegie Mellon was ahead of everybody in England back there. Oxford and Cambridge and University College London are now among the best. What's changed in the last 5 years is that the people in China have recognized that the Chinese universities have gotten really good. A friend of mine who's a Stanford professor in engineering told me 5 years ago that he thinks Tsinghua University, it's in Beijing and it's called China's MIT, is as good as MIT or Stanford. And as that has been getting true, and the Chinese have put an enormous amount of money and effort into improving their AI research, more and more the people in China are saying, why the heck do we want to go to the United States where some of the people treat us like bugs? And there's a whole lot of racism against Asian people in the US. And it's even got to the point that they destroyed the career of an MIT professor with false accusations of what his ties were to China.
Mhm.
And after a year and a half and 200 MIT professors signing a petition saying, we know this guy, your claims against him are nonsense. Finally, those the case that was threatening to put him in jail
Really?
was
Wow.
cut. And anybody from China in technology knows stories like that because there are a lot of them.
Mhm. So I guess you would say,
Any,
Dave, that the immigration policies that this current administration is now kind of moving forward on are going to end up really harming the country more than anything else in terms of its technology and probably in other sectors as well. You mentioned agriculture. I'm sure there are going to be many sectors that are impacted by these new policies as they get rolled out.
it's going to include medicine.
Hmm.
In medicine, the Chinese are finally getting close. Something like 30% of all the new medicines that went into testing last year, by one count, were done in China.
Hmm.
And a huge percentage of the stuff that is done at Harvard and Stanford and Columbia is done by people who came for their advanced training in the United States and decided to stay here. And when I read the Chinese press because you can't keep up on technology without it. And again, I'm seeing these stories about distinguished American professors going back home to China because, like most people, they think the country they grew up in is where they want to be and their relatives are, and they get the food they like. So, cutting back on skilled immigration, being prejudiced against Asians who are bringing in so much of the technology is, as I say, it's going to decimate artificial intelligence. The Biden administration was doing these things that I was telling you about, going after MIT professors on nonsense. They actually had a whole team in the Justice Department whose job was to go after Chinese in America because they thought a lot of them were cooperating with the Chinese universities. And some of them were, but there's something against the law about cooperating with the Chinese universities.
Now, you mentioned impact on medicine, just a corollary initiative by this new administration. We just withdraw, that I say we, the United States, from the World Health Organization. So, again,
what you're not seeing is I put my hands over my eyes in horror.
Yeah,
Although
yeah.
Getting out of the World Health Organization made some mistakes in dealing with COVID because we'd never had anything like that before. And they made the best decisions the best scientists in the world could come out with. And in general, they were accurate. They exaggerated how well masks would work, but masks probably saved about 100,000 lives in the United States. We still had 1 million deaths despite the masks and so on. So the World Health Organization, every so often you get the news story about this outbreak of Ebola coming out of the Congo or Senegal or Brazil. It turns out that the people who go to help the local physicians are mostly from the World Health Organization. It does a lot of absolutely necessary work.
And now we have this new virus, Dave. I just heard a little bit about avian flu, which folks are looking at as being a possible big time hazard, perhaps pandemic in quality or in impact. I would, I don't know a lot about who the World Health Organization is structured, but in my mind, I would think if you got problems with it, you want to fix it. You don't leave it. You want to fix it. You want to transform it. You want to make it work better. To me, and I guess it's not any great insight. It looks like purely political move from this administration's point of view. It doesn't seem to be grounded in anything analytical.
It's not even very political. It's personal anger.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump, in the first year of the epidemic, said, for example, "Oh, it's nothing but a bad flu. We don't have to worry about it."
Mm-hmm.
That's almost an exact quote. He said that, "Oh, we have a cure for it, ivermectin." Dozens of studies checked ivermectin, and it wasn't a cure. And while the World Health Organization didn't say Donald Trump was lying, they simply said that, yes, ivermectin is a mistake, and no, the flu does not kill 1 million people in 3 years in the United States alone. And so he got really mad at the World Health Organization and the American scientists like Tony Fauci, who I happen to know and is as honorable as they come. So there is Fox News and there is Madra, and there are at least 40% of the American population that is getting wild misinformation that is resulting in people dying as it becomes part of public policy or what people did.
Wow.
Now, I am not qualified to tell you whether or not you should get an mRNA vaccine against COVID. I do. And almost everybody I know with medical background does. But you have to make up your mind on that. But to just turn around and refuse to handle the science. But I thought you were going to say something else. When
What
I
was
put my hands over my eyes in
that?
horror, it was just because he cut the funding to the National Institute of Health. The National Institutes of Health in the Washington suburbs has done an enormous number of the most important pieces of work against cancer, against diabetes, and against almost everything. It's a fabulous research establishment that the government has been supporting pretty well for 20 or 30 years. And that's where much of the progress in medicine has come from. And we brought to the show a lot of the medical progress over the years because there are good things happening. They now can cure sickle cell, although the side effects of the cure are pretty serious. The death rate from breast cancer has gone down from 50% to 20%. Is that adequate? No. Of course we want better. But much of that research is happening, and cutting research is the last thing you want to do if you don't want people to die.
I hadn't heard that they're making those cuts, Dave. How significant are they?
That was just a few hours ago.
Okay, it just happened today, huh?
Yeah, that just happened
Right.
today.
Today
Okay.
being Tuesday. Wow. Okay, what else is going on? I'm tired of talking about that guy in the White House and how he's trying to turn back the clock on so many initiatives. What else is happening in the world of
Let me
tech?
tell you a few
We
good
got about
things in
five
the
minutes
morning.
before we got to wrap up.
Okay. All the people doing brain and nerve research now accept that the brain is not the only part of the nervous system that matters. And in fact, that there are signals coming to and from the brain from, among other things, your gut and the microbiome there. That's amazing when you think about it. And it turns out that the work being done, in particular in the microbiome, is already starting to help cure some people's problems.
Mhm.
And I just got from Eric Topol at Scripps, one of the best writers on science and a major scientist, that we now have more evidence in our gut taking center stage for what we eat. In other words, our brain is not where we get the demand for sugar. Our gut releasing hormones and other signals provides the desire for more sugar.
I guess we should not be surprised, Dave, that the body mind operates in a holistic manner and that, all the components are interconnected and talk to each other. I guess, Western science, has a way of kind of compartmentalizing everything and separating one discipline from the other. And now we're finding out, Western science, that all these different components are interconnected and that you cannot really divorce the brain from the rest of the body. And the body is sending signals and messages to the brain. And that's interesting, that in particular, what you're talking about, the sugar craving and where that's coming from. And that is so endemic to this culture here in America in particular. That's something that really needs to be addressed.
Okay, and let me give a warning. A French woman was conned out of almost $1 million, her life saving, by scammers pretending to be the actor Brad Pitt. And they could create videos and Zooms of somebody who looks just like Brad Pitt and talks just like Brad Pitt
Hmm.
and use that to scam people.
Hmm.
It is it's wonderful that we can do this great stuff if you're somebody trying to make a movie, but you've got to be very, very scared, particular about letting people have your money.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly cautious. I don't know about scared. Maybe scared, but certainly cautious before you put your dollars out there, because it's hard to believe what you see and hear these days, Dave, given how the technology is now able to just kind of create out of thin air whatever it wants to. So we really have to be very careful in how we consume media, and in particular the stuff that's now out there on the web. Um, maybe another show idea for us, Dave, is helping people decipher and kind of how do we read the landscape in media, and how do we go through and how do we know what's fake and what's not fake, and how do we respond to emails and not respond to emails? There's so much coming at us that we really need to help folks figure out how to navigate through some of the noise that's out there in the media world. And it's not just noise; it's some of it is very what's the word? I mean, it's really coming at you. It's really very negative. And
May I have the last word?
yeah, go ahead.
In Italy, a 15-year-old boy was charged with, among other things, hacking into the Ministry of Education to change his grades.
Mm-hmm.
When they looked at what this teenager was doing, they discovered he had actually also hacked in to the navigation system that was directing oil tankers and other humongous ships through the Mediterranean.
My goodness. Yes.
So he had the ultimate computer game.
Wow.
Oil tankers.
Wow. Wow. Incredible, Dave. The more sophisticated and advanced we become, the more vulnerable we become. It's a crazy world we live in. Okay, well, that just about does it for us. This has been Community and Technology. Dave Bernstein and Stu Reed on WHCR 90.3 FM and on the web at WHCR.org. Every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. Tune in. Just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.